Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Rachel Macy Stafford, who's here to share with us her new book, Soul Shift, The Weary Human's Guide to Getting Unstuck and Reclaiming Your Path to Joy. So welcome to the show, Rachel Macy Stafford.
Thank you for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
So I teach an online course and an in-person workshop called Soul Shift, and I've been doing that since 2018. And I started noticing there was a theme that kept coming up among my participants. And that was just basically, I can sum it up in a couple words. Humans are weary. And I'm not talking about just tired. I'm talking about like soul weary, like desperately in search of like that joy of that you can find in the everyday. And I just think with the drudgery and the despair and just the distraction, we feel like we're in this loop, that we can't get out of. And so I've had my own experience with, realizing that I had lost my joy and my zest for life. And so hearing what they were saying, knowing what my experience was, I was able to write a book about it.
So can you share a little of your story with us?
Absolutely. So back in 2016, I was going on a family vacation with my husband and my two daughters, and we were pulling out of the driveway, and I was upset about something trivial. I can't even remember what it was now, but I was going on and on about that, and my husband turned to me looking like someone he loved had died. Like he just looked so sad. And he said, Rachel, you're never happy anymore. And I wanted to deny it and say, oh, what are you talking about? But those words that he said matched a feeling that I had been having inside me that I just hadn't wanted to listen to. And that was probably the first time in maybe at least 10 or 15 years that I really admitted the truth to myself that I had lost my joy and I was becoming a person that I didn't want to be.
I think the last couple of years has really done that for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're maybe realizing that they're having the same issues. Are you getting more people now because of that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I've definitely noticed in the past 2 to 3 years, it doesn't matter really what the background is, what the life situation is. It's just all across the board that people are saying, I have just lost this everyday joy that I used to have. And I don't even know who I am anymore. And I don't know how to get back to it.
So where do people start? What's the first place they start? They notice that we're in this massive place of unhappiness. So where do we go from there?
Well, in my journey, when I admitted that painful truth to myself, that was losing my joy, and I wanted to really change the path that I had found myself on. I was on a very depleted, distracted, prioritizing the wrong things. And so what I did as a special education teacher who knows that you don't have a transformation unless you take small steps. We're not going to be doing a big overhaul of our life. We're not going to be doing these big sweeping changes. we're going to start this transformation with small steps. And what my small step to begin my journey, it kind of happened on accident, but through awareness, which is a very big part of having these soul shifting experiences and transformation, is I was in the middle of making my daughter's lunch. I had the computer open, the phone was buzzing. In my mind, I'm going through my to-do list, and I look up, and my young daughter, Avery, was watching The Lion King on the sofa. And this little voice inside me just said, go to her, go sit with Avery. And because I had faced that painful truth that I didn't like the person I was becoming, I thought, hey, here's an opportunity. I'm hearing that there's a chance to connect with something that matters. So I basically put that knife on top of that peanut butter jar, didn't look at the clock, didn't, assess whether I had time or not to do it. I just went. And when I sat down on the couch, Avery slid over, kind of like, two magnets come together. And she did something that no one in my whole life has ever done, which is she picked up my hand and kissed my palm. And that moment was so affirming to me that, I thought, here I am wondering, how do I get back to a life that really matters? Well, I got to let go of what doesn't matter. All the trivial, all the, so-called urgent things that the world demands of us. And so that is what started what I called my practice of presence. And I just started designating these very short 5 to 10 minutes each day where I pushed away all the distractions in my life, my phone, my computer, my to-do list, even my guilt, my regret. I pushed those away. I set my timer, and I thought, I am just going to be here in this moment. And what that did was it brought my family back into my realm. It was sad because I had been present at home and doing the things, going to work and taking care of the kids. I had been there, but not really there. And so practicing presence, even for those short time periods where I just made myself available to my family, I felt this sense of peace that I had not felt when I was going 100 miles per hour. And so where that led was it eventually led to taking it outside the home, like in wait periods. Instead of reaching for the phone or reaching for distraction, I said, I'm going to practice presence. I'm just going to be here in this moment. And again, being able to connect with other human beings, being able to hear the thoughts on my own heart, it was truly life-changing. And it all started with that practice of presence, 10 minutes a day.
Let's say someone they're in this place where they're not sure they need to make a soul shift.
Mm-hmm.
What typically shows up for them?
Well, when I lead people through this course, something that a lot of people tend to talk about is just this feeling of resentment. Resentment is a service to us. When we feel angry and resentful, it usually means that our boundaries are being crossed and we're not honoring our needs or our desires or our dreams. And so if you are feeling this sense of anger, resentment, constant frustration, just kind of mad at life. It's like that is a really important message to acknowledge and say, what is my body? What is my soul? What is my heart trying to tell me about how I'm using my time and my energy? And a lot of times, I can speak for myself, my resentment and anger came out in some quite damaging ways. I actually threw a casserole dish on the counter and broke it into a million pieces. And I thought, what in the world? Who is this? What is happening to me? Why am I getting so upset? Well, that was my body telling me, you are too stretched. You are too depleted. You're not doing anything to fulfill your own heart and your own soul. And so I would probably start with those really strong feelings that maybe they're very uncomfortable and even painful. And you can say, wait a minute, I'm going to sit with this feeling and I'm going to listen to what it's trying to tell me.
Soul shift sounds like such a just a wonderful accomplishment, but I think maybe some people might think it's also a very difficult thing to obtain. So what is a soul shift?
Mm-hmm. So basically, a soul shift happens. It could happen many times throughout the day, but usually it's in those moments of conflict or stress or big feelings, or, maybe it's an interaction with someone. And when you have a soul shifting experience, instead of shutting down, pushing away, dismissing your feelings or the feelings of the person who you are engaging with, a soul shift allows you to respond from a place of compassion, presence, and just awareness. So let's say you are battling traffic and you, in your past, before you learned the soul shifting process, you might have started cussing and ranting and hitting the steering wheel. And you realize that doesn't do anything to help that situation. It doesn't do anything to calm your nervous system. So after you started practicing presence, practicing the soul shift process, you think to yourself, what can I control right now? I can't control the traffic. I can control my response to the traffic. I can look at this as an opportunity to have some alone time. I can look at this as an opportunity to think of what I'm grateful for, or to listen to this podcast I've been wanting to listen to. So when you have a soul shift, it's not anything that even, is going to be this big momentous thing. It's a small feeling inside you that says, I can handle this uncomfortable stressor in my life. I can handle this because I know how to be compassionate with myself. I know how to sit with myself in these hard feelings and listen, to what they're trying to tell me.
Do people tend to have a hard time getting to that place where they want to listen to these hard feelings?
Well, when I've experienced this with people through my courses, at first, it does seem uncomfortable and maybe even a little bit scary to start really sitting with your feelings and acknowledging your feelings, because we're really good at pushing them away. We're really good at keeping ourselves so busy that we don't think about them. But when I show people, okay, tomorrow you're going to have a 5-minute increment where You're going to do something that feels fulfilling to you, that feels peaceful to you, that feels quiet. And so maybe that's sitting down, lighting a candle, putting on some soft music, maybe reading a book that speaks to you, or journaling. That's usually some of those suggestions that I start with. And then people will kind of create this designated time. They say, I'm going to show up for myself. And what they realize in that quiet time period is maybe something that will help guide them through their day. So like maybe you've decided, I'm going to start my morning with my practice of presence, with my coffee and the birds. And you are thinking because you're giving yourself time to think and listen. And you decide, you know what? I have that really troubling request on my plate that I've been putting off. I've been putting off because it's hard to say no. And so you're sitting there in that quiet time and you think, you know what? I don't want to do that. And that's why I've been pushing it off. I haven't said no because it's hard to say no. But now, after listening to myself, listening to my heart, listening to what I need to thrive, I know that I can say no. I need to say no. And so basically having that practice of presence to start your morning, you start out listening to your inner world versus listening to the outer world that does not have your best interests at heart.
What are some of the most common needs that you hear from people?
I hear very, very often people say, I need space for myself. I need space to care for myself. I need space to listen to myself and what I need. And a lot of the people who take my course are caregivers. And so they're caring for themselves and giving themselves that time and space that they need to be nurtured usually comes at the very end of the list. So they don't get it. And so a lot of times when we do have a practice of presence that we do together, when we'll just have some really nice deep breaths and we'll just get really centered in our bodies. And I'll just ask them, what do you need right now? What's the first thing that comes up when I say, what do you need right now? And people will tell me that they hear, basically like this scream, like, I need space. I need people to back away. Give me my boundaries back. And so I think that a lot of times we just feel like we have to constantly meet the demands of other people that we shortchange ourselves.
At the beginning of this discussion, you mentioned devices, and how
Yes.
big a distraction is that, and how does that impact us?
Oh, it is a very, very big distraction. That's actually kind of where my awareness journey about distraction came in. Was my phone had kind of become like this appendage that I never was without. And I realized the phone was taking priority over the people in front of me. And I also realized that I would become really agitated if someone that I loved wanted my attention when I was on the phone or using the phone. And again, that goes back to, this is not who I want to be. This is not how I want to interact with my family. And so really beginning to realize I need to put some boundaries around my technology use was a starting point for me. And I realized, okay, I need to have at least one room in my house where the phone and technology do not go. And that became my bedroom. And I just went and got an old school alarm clock so that I could wake up. And it was really quite amazing when I started sharing with my partner, with my kids, okay, my bedroom's going to be, this basically hands-free, technology-free area. And my husband really liked it, because it allowed us to have this more, deeper conversations. We wouldn't be so tired because we wouldn't stay up, looking at our phones. And so it was really beautiful to see that, inviting people in my family into these boundaries of less distraction and more connection. It was beautiful to see that they responded to them. And I started that when my girls were young, and it was really interesting to see how they grew up, knowing that we have these not just rooms in our house where we don't bring technology, but we also have rituals. We have dinner time. We don't bring our phones to the dinner table. And we do these fun excursions a lot of times on Saturday mornings. Again, we put our phones, in our purses or in our backpacks, and we don't get them out. And so my family has learned along with me the joy of living life as it's happening, not looking at it through a screen, or not having that pressure to record every moment of your life and then post it. And so just being able to be in the moment has really, really impacted my relationships.
Is it that people are in such pain that's why they're focusing on all these distractions?
Well, I do think that part of our culture has made it so important to have this external validation that comes a lot of the times through social media. And so we think, okay, I need to be available 24/7 because, this is how I'm getting my validation of who I am. And so then, like I was saying, my phone became an appendage. Well, then you can't go anywhere without your phone. You have it because you're always thinking, I've got to check it. Who needs me right now? And so I do think we use the phone as an escape a lot of times rather than a tool. And, so I also talked to my daughters early on about these red flags. I told them, like, your body will start to tell you when you've been on a screen too long. Your eyes will get tired and you'll start to maybe even feel kind of bad about yourself. Like, wow, look at all these people having so much fun. And I'm not doing that. I wasn't invited, so acknowledging that that your body says enough. I need to put this down. That's such a valuable piece of awareness to not only give ourselves, but to give our family. And sometimes, we use the phone as an escape, but actually it tends to even make us feel worse a lot of times than how we felt before we started, because it can really play a number on your self-worth, as many studies are finding about social media and teenage girls. So talking to your children and your partner about how much time they're spending and how that makes them feel is just very, very important in this day and age.
Well, you definitely touched on something I'd like to dive more into, and it's the practice of true self-worth. And I'd love for you to expound on that. What is that?
So the practice of true self-worth is really key to having these soul shifting experiences, because if you do feel like your worth is wrapped up in, you know, how much you accomplish or how many followers you have on social media or how much work you accomplish, if you are judging your worth by these external variables, you are cutting yourself off from your authentic self, from what truly matters to you and what you need to thrive. And so recognizing, my self-worth doesn't come from, how fast I respond to a text or how accommodating I am when someone asks me to do something. My self-worth comes from, how kind I am to my loved ones, myself, how I'm using my God-given gifts to better the world. My self-worth comes from loving people well, loving myself well, and just recognizing that in order to give ourselves the things that we need to thrive as our most authentic self, we have to have boundaries. And I talked about technology boundaries, but there are also boundaries that we need around our time and our energy. And so being able to say, I'm worthy of rest, whether I've accomplished this to-do list or not, is critical to being able to be a well cared for self. And so that's how the self-worth, that practice, asking yourself, what do I want to do? What do I need? Instead of reading the room and deciding to let the world tell you what you need and how you need to spend your time. That is how you get back to a place of peace and joy in your life.
Is there a way that people can kind of assess where their boundaries are and what parts they need to focus on?
Yes. In my Soul Shift book, I talk about basically some questions. They're boundary assessment tools. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor and they assess you before they say, okay, here's the area that needs tending. So in my book, Soul Shift, I have these questions or statements that I like people to look at and just really honestly answer them. This is not like a time to judge yourself and say, oh gosh, I have a lot of yeses. I have no boundaries. No, this is a time to say, here is some awareness that I'm getting that I can use to figure out where I need some better boundaries. So like, for example, I asked them, can you recall a time when you were treated badly and failed to speak up? Or another statement is, would it be accurate to say you give away too much of your time? And another one is, are there times when you say yes, when you just want to say no? So going through that list, people find them to be very eye-opening. They can say, gosh, I answered yes to a lot of those statements. What does that mean? Well, that means that you are pretty much neglecting that part of you that needs to be honored, like your time, your space, your energy. You're giving it away and it's costing you. What is it costing you? Well, as I was saying earlier, it was costing me my joy. It was costing me having healthy relationships, because then I was taking out my aggressions on my family and my resentment on my family. And so being able to recognize, I say yes when I really want to say no. Now that I'm aware of that, I am going to start pausing when someone asks me to do something. I'm going to pause and I'm going to say, what do I want to do? I'm going to ask myself that. And then I'm going to say what the true answer is, not what I think other people are going to want to hear, but what really, truly is my honest response to, do I want to do this or not? I'm going to ask myself. And that's how, that's how we practice self-worth, is we do it one choice at a time. We are presented with an opportunity to do something with our time, our energy, our talents, and we become accustomed to giving it away because that is how we've derived our worth, for so many years. And then we begin to realize that's really cutting me off from my authentic self. So now I'm going to ask myself, what do I want to do? And then I'm going to say it. And that is how we really start honoring our self and everything, that we have to offer the world. Because as you know, if we're giving away all of our precious time and energy and focus to all these different things, the thing that we're really here to do and to contribute to doesn't have what it needs. And it just kind of shrivels up. And I realized through my practice of presence that not writing for 30 years was really creating this big hole in my heart. I felt so empty because I wasn't doing what I felt like my God-given purpose is, which is to write words about being a human and what we need to thrive, and sharing them from a vulnerable place. I wasn't doing that. Instead, I went into teaching because that's what everyone thought I should do. And that's what I got accolades for. But being a writer, that was my purpose and my dream. And so being able to start setting boundaries allowed me to start using my time and energy in a way that not only fulfilled me, but it brought my gift of writing to the world.
That's just, I have to applaud you, because I think a lot of times people would get to this place where, and maybe this is something they work through with you, where, they're the people who are asking things of them, time, resources, whatever, they're so used to having, that person say, yes, I'll go ahead and do this, even though they're not feeling like it. So how does that work out with that relationship? I think some people will be like, well, now they're unhappy with me. Now I don't know what to do.
Well, that's a great question. And I can remember the very first time that I tried this out, this idea of, I'm going to protect my time and energy so that I can have time to write. And someone called because I was the go-to person. You get a reputation pretty quickly that, Rachel will say yes. Rachel does a good job. Well, someone called and said, can you head up the book fair? And I took a deep breath and I said, Rachel, what do you want to do? And I knew I did not want to head up the book fair. And I said, I'm sorry, I won't be able to do that this time. And she said, that's okay. I'll just go to the next person on the list. And I couldn't believe it because I thought, oh my gosh, there's been a list this whole time. And I've been saying yes when it's just, and it's not always that simple. But what I learned in that moment is I am worthy of saying no. I do not have to hold up everything, especially things that other people can do. We can take turns. And so being able to say no in that moment and realize, okay, she can move on. She can find someone who's really actually passionate about that. And that's a gift. And then, of course, it's a little harder when you have to say it to people, maybe that you have a more close relationship with. So another example that I can give is just someone had asked me if I would endorse a book that after I read it, I realized my values are not in alignment with that person's values. And so I had to say, no, I can't endorse this book for you. And I know that the person was counting on me because I would do that for people. I would say, sure, I'll do that. But then once I started getting in touch with who I am and how I wanted to show up in the world, I realized I'm going to honor myself. I'm going to honor my beliefs. And yes, there was a fallout and it pained me because I didn't like hurting people and I didn't like losing this friendship. But at the same time, I had my self-respect intact. And I had to tell myself, I said it as kindly and honestly as I could, that I could not do this. And I'm not responsible for how this person is responding to my boundary. And that is a hard thing if you've been a people pleaser for your whole life, to not take responsibility for other people's emotions and how they're, the worst for me was when my parents would say, I'm so disappointed in you. And so when people tell me, I'm really disappointed in you, you're not doing this for me, it's a trigger for me. And I have to say to myself, Rachel, you're not responsible for this person's happiness. You're not responsible for how they feel about this boundary you're setting. And it is not easy. And I'm still working on it every day. But I'm starting to live a life that feels really authentic to me and my values. And that is something I can be really proud of.
Well, just like that friend kind of peeled away, do we end up having other relationships that show up that match our values and who it is that we are?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a beautiful point. It's so true. We think it's going to be the end of the world that this person has now left our life. And there, I had a lot of times where I was so sad. I was like, what am I going to do now? This person is not a part of my life. And I realized, okay, I have some extra time now. Where can I turn this time and energy? How can I stop, focusing on the loss, because it really was draining me to keep focusing on that. So I shifted to, where can I put this time and energy now? And it was really beautiful to be able to start visiting an elderly person at a local retirement center with that extra time and realizing, wow, this means so much to this sweet lady who doesn't have family in the area. And so being able to use my time and energy that way was so fulfilling. So that's just such a great point that you made.
Well, I really appreciate your book because it really walks through a lot of things I think we struggle with. And one was self-love.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and you can, please share with us what it is that you think on this, but I think some people might think that's a really far leap for them.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that we become aware of as we're doing the soul shift process is just how critical we are of ourselves. Some of us realize that we have an inner voice that is kind of like a bully. And when we begin getting quiet and we begin listening to ourselves, it's pretty, it can be pretty earth-shattering to hear that we often tell ourselves we're not enough, or we can't go out looking like that, or you said you were going to do something about this, and look, you haven't done anything, you are lazy. And so becoming aware of these soundtracks that we have in our head, these negative soundtracks, it can be, painful. And I know when I started realizing that I was talking to myself that way, and I saw how it would sometimes then spill out on my daughters, I realized how I'm talking to myself with very condescending, mean talk is shattering any chance I have at being loving and giving myself the things that I need to thrive. And beginning to act in loving ways for myself began with one choice. Like I was saying earlier, all of this begins with one choice. And so when I caught myself saying, "You're so unmotivated, Rachel. Look at all this work that you haven't gotten done," I became aware that talking to myself like that was definitely not going to motivate me. In fact, it took me even further down the hole of being unmotivated. And so I thought, gosh, would you say that to one of your daughters? You're so unmotivated. Would you say that to a friend? And I thought, heck no, I wouldn't say that to someone. And so I said, what would I say to a friend or to my daughter? And I know that I would have said something very compassionate, like, Rachel, you have been handling a lot of stuff right now. You've had the medical problems with your daughter. You've had that worry about your parents. You've been trying to write this book. Well, of course you're feeling unmotivated because you're tired. So let's just start with one small task in this big pile, and let's just start there. And so when I realized I had a choice on how I could talk to myself, so many of these messages that we have inside of us that are negative are things that people said to us, maybe something rude about our body. I can remember someone saying, "Your arms are too big to wear a sleeveless dress." And I didn't wear a sleeveless dress for over 20 years because that soundtrack was in my head. And when I really got quiet and thought, wait a second, that's not my truth. My arms are not too big to wear a sleeveless dress. My arms are beautiful. My arms have held my children. My arms have written books. My arms have hugged my loved ones. And I am worthy of showing them off. And so this idea of self-love, it all comes down to, how are you going to treat yourself in those moments when you are saying these messages to yourself that are just hurtful? And we wouldn't talk to our friend that way. So let's not talk to ourselves that way.
So how do we get to this place of really changing that internal mantras that we are hearing? You're not good enough. You're too heavy, too old, too whatever, not successful, whatever the deal is. So how do we move beyond that?
Well, one of the tools that I use to do that is spelled out for readers in the Soul Shift book. And basically, Jason Mosier is a doctor who, he's a researcher, that he discovered that when people talk to themselves as they would a friend, it actually changes, like it has a physical reaction in the brain. And so what Jason Mosier encourages people to do is, when they hear that critical statement, and if you're like me, you have one of those statements that kind of comes up a lot for you. And I went through a time when I would tell myself, I'm a bad parent. And that did not do anything to help me in those moments to tell myself I'm a bad parent. But what Dr. Jason Mosier recommends is isolating that statement and then transforming it from an I statement to a second person, you. So then it becomes like talking to a friend. Instead of, I am a bad parent, I shift that to, what would I say to a friend? And I might say, you know what? You yelled. And sometimes parents yell because they are feeling the weight of the world. Now, that yelling is a sign that something's not right in your body. That's a cry for help. So what do you need right now to start to feel better? And so what I recommend in my Soul Shift book is to take a piece of paper and to write down that self-limiting statement that you say to yourself a lot. Maybe it's, I hate my body, or I'm a bad parent, or I can't do this. I can't handle this change. So isolate that statement, put it on a piece of paper, and then think to yourself, how can I shift this to really what it is? It's a more impartial view. So like, imagine yourself like standing over you saying, instead of, I hate my body, you say, gosh, is that true? Do you really hate your body? Or do you just hate that society has told you there are these beauty standards that you don't match up with? So your body has carried you your whole life. Your body has done these miraculous things and your heart keeps beating. Now, your body showed up for you. So how can you show up for your body today? So basically, it's just shifting these self-limiting statements to a statement of self-compassion. And I have people actually write them down so they can really see the self-limiting statement and then watch as they kind of like take this bridge from self-sabotage to self-compassion. It's a very intentional shift that gets easier with practice.
One of the things I really appreciate in your book is how you talked about having a little bit of a frustration, and how Natalie's response to you going in and apologizing to her, I thought her response was just so precious.
Yes. So at one of those times when I wasn't taking good care of myself because I was relying on my old measures of self-worth, which was accomplishing. And so I was doing a lot of different things to either accommodate or accomplish, and I was burning myself out. And so I had a very volatile reaction to something my husband said as we were cleaning up after dinner. And that's when I took the casserole dish and I slammed it on the counter, and all the pieces flew in every direction. And I scared everybody in the house, especially Natalie, who was right there wiping off her plate. And so after I calmed down, I went to her room and I told her, I said, I am not taking good care of myself right now. And I think that's why I had that violent reaction to a very small stressor. And Natalie had a very surprising reaction. She looked up at the bookshelf where she had all this set of, it was medical textbooks that my mom had gotten from a garage sale. And Natalie's eyes shifted over to the medical textbooks, and she started rattling off all of these wonderful self-loving things that I could start. She said, Mom, are you drinking enough water every day? Do you know how many ounces of water you need? And Mom, I don't think you're getting your heart rate up every day, and your heart needs to pump that blood. So she's giving me all these wonderful suggestions. And I thought, wow, I'm worthy of giving myself the time and the energy and the care that I need to thrive, because what good am I if I am not here? And that, seeing Natalie being so excited and loving me that way, I thought, if I can't do this for myself, let me do it for her.
Yeah, I love that. And, telling you, you need to sleep, is it 7 hours every night?
Yes.
From the mouth of babes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, and Rachel, what do you want our listeners to take away from your book?
So what I want people to take away is just this notion that it's never too late to start living the life that you feel like is your authentic life, your true self, and showing up in the world bravely, boldly, flawed, and full of hope is just not that far out of reach. For me, it began with 10 minutes of pushing away the world to sit with my heart and start listening. And that is where I encourage everyone to start. And then if they want the tools and the guidance, they can just pick up a copy of Soul Shift.
And what is your website?
My website is handsfreemama.com. And if you go to handsfreemama.com, you can get links to all of my books. You can read some of my articles that I've published, and you can also join my very supportive online community. It's called the Hands Free Revolution.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rachel. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Soul Shift, The Weary Human's Guide to Getting Unstuck and Reclaiming Your Path to Joy. Soul Shift is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. You can also purchase this book from the publisher Sounds True at SoundsTrue.com. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.